Joining us from his home in Charlottesville, Virginia, Chris Long. Chris, you were only an Eagle for 2 seasons, but you became a legend here, truly. An epic performance on parade day, and you really seem to connect with Philadelphia. I know we wish you were here for so much longer. Out of an 11-year career, parts of 11 seasons, do you wish you had played more of your career in Philadelphia?
Yeah, Mike, and by the way, it's great seeing you, buddy. I miss all my
Great
friends up
seeing
there
you.
in Philly. It's a funny thing because, I played for the St. Louis Rams for 8 years. That was kind of my identity. That was in my blood, and I wanted to retire a Ram, but things went kind of sideways. I got hurt, and stuff happens. But with the team moving, I don't really have like an alumni situation there. There's no St. Louis Rams anymore, and I'm not an LA Ram. I'm a St. Louis Ram. So for me, Philly is where I finished. It's where I had some of the most fun. It's where I really connected with a city, and I still have so much love for that place. So yeah, I mean, in another life, maybe I play 11 or 13 or 14 years there. But it just was what it was. And I'll take the 2 years I had. I was really lucky.
Yeah, and we'll take those 2 years as well. Look, I lived in Boston for 5 years, man. I know what it's about. And I tell my friends, you ought to pay me for leaving, because literally the year I left, they started winning everything. Celtics,
Yeah.
Patriots,
Yeah.
Red Sox won.
They've had a good
But
run.
they have had a good run, and it's enough already. But there's just a little more. There's a little more grit here, don't you think? It's just a little more grit. I don't know what it
You
is
know what
about
you know
Philadelphia.
what I love about Philly. Not throwing any shade at Boston and not comparing to Boston or St. Louis, because I had some wonderful fans, that embraced me wherever I was, but especially like St. Louis, like they really stuck with us in some 1 in 15, 2 in 14 type years. I mean, those are folks that like helped me get my foundation off the ground and showed up and cheered for us when we were getting our butts kicked and stuck around and had hope, which is really dangerous when Jeff Fisher came and we couldn't get over the hump then. But Philly, I walked into a situation where I recognized that kind of loyalty. I knew the reputation of Eagles fans. I knew the reputation of the city. And I also knew that this is a franchise that had been at it for a long time, but been close and just hadn't gotten one. And when I signed, it wasn't really about bringing a Super Bowl to Philly or being a part of that group, but it quickly became apparent that we could make history. And that is when I think that bond really grew between everybody on that team and that whole ride. I mean, so I'm just really lucky. And I think what's cool about Philly is not only that loyalty that I mentioned that attracted me to Philly, but also it's a place that, like, if you bust your ass, people respect you. And that was the idea I got. I said, well, this is going to be no problem because I work. And so there's that. There's also the fact that Philly has all the facilities right there in the city, which I think is very special. Wells Fargo, Link, et cetera, right there in South Philly. And I love that.
Yeah.
Like Foxborough, anywhere else I played, it was 45 minutes outside the city. We practice in St. Louis almost 35 minutes outside the city with no traffic. So that civic feel in Philly was really special to me.
Yeah. You talk about making history in Philadelphia. And by the way, I didn't mean to cast any shade at Boston either. Some of my best friends
I
in life
understand the
remain in
rivalry.
Boston. Yeah, it is. But I always bust their chops over. They're busting mine most of the time now,
Yeah, no,
saying
I
it's
hear you.
enough already.
You got to take it when you can get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go from making history with the Eagles really to right now what looks like, Chris, the opposite of that. The team has taken a step backward every year since 2017. Right now, just 1-4-1. What do you make of the state of things right now?
Well, I think, it's always tougher after you win one, right, as a fan base and, as a city, because you've seen what is, what potential looks like and what that feeling looks like, and you want it back, right? But it's hard to stay at the top. And that's something every team grapples with after they win a championship. It became pretty apparent to me in my first opportunity to defend one as, a member of that team. Because when I left New England in free agency, I never got a chance to defend one up there. And just being in a locker room, right after that is very stressful because you have a target on your back and the coaches try to drive that home, sometimes too much. And, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But there is that relaxed kind of, we did it, and I think it's hard to overcome. Now, I don't think that's this team's problem. I think this team, I think 17 was special. I think it's really hard to recreate that. But the window is still open. It's just that the window has been occupied by probably the most snake bit roster I've ever seen over a 2-3 year period as far as injuries are concerned. I mean, there are definitely holes in the roster, and there are personnel issues. But when Carson and Jason are the only two guys offensively that are starters on that 2-point conversion try with the game on the line, that says something. And
Yeah.
when the big story every week in Philly is naturally going to be the franchise quarterback, who, by the way, helped us get where we got in 2017.
I love your tweet this week, or it was during the game, with the Undertaker coming out
Yeah,
of the
Carson
coffin.
we thought he was.
Wentz.
I mean, people were just leaving him for dead, and he hasn't turned the corner yet. I mean, but the point is, I'm sure it's hard to play quarterback in that city. It's really hard when you were a lot of the reason we were in the playoffs with home field advantage. There's no way that happens as easily as it does if we have to go on the road that year. And that's Carson Wentz throwing the oop to Nick Foles. But coming out of that year, it's no secret that there's always been this comparison thing. And I think that's unfortunate because they're both great players in their own right in different ways. And, situations matter. It wasn't so easy for Nick down in Jacksonville. He's in a better situation now. He wasn't in a great situation in St. Louis. You got to take all these things into account. I think it's really hard right now to evaluate this team, and especially the quarterback, because everybody is hurt. And I know that, like, everybody wants a profound take. It's really hard, especially to evaluate number 11 with who he's thrown to over the last 2 years.
Yeah. And I'll give you that on the quarterback. I think that's a great point. You look at the points that they're putting up, and they are up there, certainly in the top quarter of NFL teams in points scored, but they're also in the bottom quarter in points allowed. And if you wouldn't cast any shade at Boston, I damn sure know you're not going to cast any of Jim Schwartz. But he's taken a lot of heat in Philadelphia for his defensive play calls, for his defensive alignments. You know a lot more about it than I do, but you mentioned some of what's been happening here. And when you saw Nate Gary lined up on Chase Claypool, and Roby Coleman is saying, man, he's going to toast you, man, or
Yeah.
look like he was saying that. And that's exactly what happened. And then Jim is asked about it after the game. Why would you have that matchup? Or why not call a timeout? And he said, well, I don't call timeouts. That's a Doug thing. I really don't do that. And people are like, are you kidding me? What, this is a game on the line. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, you walk a thin line because sometimes your players are going to be in inopportune situations. There were times where I had Darren Sproles out of the backfield in St. Louis and we were playing the Saints, and you're like, how could they put me in this situation? And it might be a big down. But the point is, and, the play calling, I'm not an NFL play caller. So I legitimately couldn't tell you if I think I could do Jim Schwartz's job better than Jim Schwartz. I know it's like, it's like a dog with a bone. Sometimes it's like, once the narrative starts, I think on defense is as much a problem with that sort of thing as it is with personnel. I've said this, this year, they have neglected the second level of the defense. That's not been a priority for Howie or Jim. It just hasn't been. And we've won that way. We won that way, and they've continued to win that way. But there are going to be situations where that really comes back to haunt you in the run game and in the pass game. And another thing is, I feel like in the third level of defense, the secondary, a bunch of guys who are just getting settled in their positions last year are now playing different positions. You get the corner situation improve with Darius Slay, but you lose a great chunk of leadership and production in Malcolm. And, so I think there are issues there. Now, the funniest thing coming into the season was everybody was talking about the Washington football team's D-line. And of course, we gave them 6 layups out of 8. I mean, they earned 2 of them in that opener. The best defensive line in the division, it resides in Philly. It really does.
Yeah.
The best in the NFL.
No argument.
The best in
Yeah.
the NFL is across the state, but the two best D lines
Right.
in the NFL are in Pennsylvania. And so I think what you have to do defensively, I don't know if they're thinking about making a move before the deadline, but it might be knee jerk to go get a big splash thing to happen offensively. Offensively, they need to win the next 3 games, hunker down, take care of the football, and adapt. Defensively, you're close to being, a team that can be the side of the ball that can be a strength. I would invest there. I would. It might sound crazy to some people, but if you're looking to make a move, I'd look there on defense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to hammer the Jim Schwartz thing, but I do want your insight into it because I go back to the Super Bowl and
Yeah.
had the Eagles lost that Super Bowl, we're talking about 500 yards of
Yeah, we
offense
are.
given up. And I know we're not playing
Yeah.
a Pop Warner team there across the way with Tom
No,
Brady.
no,
I
no,
get
no.
that.
Yeah.
But 500 yards, I mean, people would have been screaming bloody murder if not jumping from the Ben Franklin Bridge. So,
Yeah.
and it seems
Oh,
like
I would have been right
defensively,
there with them. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
listen, there was a time in that Super Bowl when I felt like I was in the Matrix in the second half. Like, first off, it was a frustrating game because they were chipping out all game, and we didn't, like, you wait your whole life to get in that game, and you're like, oh, they're gonna 7-man protect the whole time, and Tom's gonna get the ball out. So you're frustrated as a rusher, and then they just start picking us apart in the second half. And there were times where Lane walked by and was like, hey, can y'all like get a stop? And this wasn't in like an encouraging tone. This was like
Yeah.
any time now. And I'm like, dude, we are trying. They're just picking us apart. So I always say
But
when
how much does
people,
it have to do with Jim, if at all? And
I
going
don't
forward,
know.
only because you had Malcolm, you had Chris Long. Now you
Yeah.
don't have that. You've got to coach a little bit more.
Well, listen, I think I think Jim did a great job in stretches in the Super Bowl run. I mean, like, I also think he's had his really good days. He's had his bad days. I also think the personnel's been a problem. I don't think the personnel's ever been settled on the back end. I don't think it's ever been settled there. And another thing is, as a side note, with that Super Bowl, whenever people stop me and they're like, hey, you beat Tom Brady, congrats. Like I didn't beat Tom Brady. Nick Foles beat Tom Brady. The offense beat Tom Brady. Those backs having days out of the backfield and LeGarrette running down people's throat. Like, we would have been right there with the fans. You said on the bridge. I probably would have gone into hiding had we lost that Super Bowl. But the defense needs to play better and needs to play better in big spots. And they will, but it's also really hard this year to put things on the defense with all the turnovers and the inopportune situations they're put in, to be fair. And this is what I keep saying about Carson. Carson is his own worst enemy, because he wants to make things happen, and he is gritty and he is tough and he doesn't want to give up on a play. His snap to release is higher this year than it's ever been. The next highest year was the Super Bowl year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The pressure rates are similar as well. Here's what I look at with Carson. The next 3 games, it's not going to cool the critics, but it's going to win you games. Manage the games, and then you can get Alshon back, maybe at some point here. Lane's coming back. You're going to get more guys back offensively than you are on defense. There's no new bodies walking through the door on defense. We're not waiting on any big comeback from anybody. Get well on offense. And if you got to make a move, make it on defense, because that's where I think you're going to have to win some games at some point.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, the NFC East, I think if they win next week or tonight as we're taping this, they can win the division. What don't you think? 2 wins, 3 wins?
I do. And what's funny, Mike, it's because I was on a team just like this, and talking about it on my pod, but like, D Gunn reminded me of this because this week he retweeted, like, the last team to be so bad to win a division was the 2010 Seahawks. And that was the Beastquake game. So they actually ended up winning. How did they get in? They beat us week 17 to win the West. And they had Charlie Whitehurst. I'll never forget about that night. Like, all you got to do is get in the dance here. That's probably what Marshawn and the Seahawks were thinking in 2010. That's what we were thinking in 2010. Unfortunately, it's the closest I ever got to the playoffs. But, they got in the playoffs with 7 wins, and they beat a New Orleans Saints team with a Hall of Fame quarterback. Anything can happen when you get in. And when I look at this team, and I saw this coming into the season, I thought the first half of the year could be rough. Look at the back half of the schedule. Now you get well. And you saw, and I think this what can be a huge lift to them, because it was to me as an Eagles fan. Monday night, listen, you asked me last week who's winning the East. It's the Cowboys. Okay. And people can be like, you disloyal, whatever. I have an obligation as a media member to tell the truth. That roster is better than the Eagles roster. But then Dak got hurt. And then Andy showed us what he looks like right now the other night. And I'm thinking to myself, the door is open. So that'll be a huge lift for these guys going into tonight is, hey, we can win this thing. So I think you're going to see a really excited, galvanized group.
Yeah. I find it interesting to say you're a media member now. And you tell the truth now because you're a media member. Just remember you said that. The truth-telling media. Okay. Just two more quick ones. One, Joe Judge, done a lot of things with the Giants. He comes from the Belichick tree. You were there in New England for a year. He's done some, no nonsense type of stuff. Is it going to fly with the Giants? Will he bring this team to victory? Not just tonight, but for the future.
He's a Philly guy, man. So he's excited to be back at home. And by the way, I think Eagles fans will really like Joe Judge as a guy. You're not going to like him, during the game, but or maybe you will. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
I hope we will.
Yeah. Joe Judge is a good dude. And he was a guy that guys respected in New England. And when he got the job, I wasn't surprised because he does have some real innate leadership qualities. Some coaches can walk in the room and fool, and try to fool guys. He's not one of those guys. He's going to try to be Bill sometimes, but you buy it for some reason, it just doesn't work for everybody. But he's going to bring along just enough of that Bill and implement the culture up there. And I think that if they can get Saquon back and figure the quarterback position out, which is a big if, I like Joe. I really do. I think the guys will play for him. Now, Daniel Jones is the most pressured guy in the NFL. And who he's looking across at for the game tonight. It's Fletcher Cox. It's Derek Barnett. It's Brandon Graham. It's Josh Sweat, who's playing well, Malik Jackson. This is a deep group. And I think if these guys make it one of these personal games, it's going to be hard for the Giants to score. I could be wrong. I hope they don't let me down, but I feel good about it.
All right. And say we're taping this on Thursday night or Wednesday night, excuse me, for Thursday night. If it's Wednesday night, what's your schedule as a player? Like, what time are you asleep? How much are you thinking about the game? How much did this get right in your chest? If it's a division rival national telecast game.
Well, the thing about being an NFL player right now is they got a captive audience, and just like any year, you can become a story pretty quickly. And one bad play, you saw the Josh Norman thing 10 days ago. So the more time you got to sit and think about a game and all those little moments and the things that could go wrong or go right, the worse. I don't like night games. I liked them because they were big situations, but I wanted to wake up and go. So what I would do probably the night before is not think about football after meetings. Once I finish meetings, and I always thought they were too late. They keep us in there too late. I hate sitting in meetings. I've been at work for 60 hours, 80 hours this week, or many hours there are in a week. I've been devoting to football. 9:00 Wednesday night, I want to watch Step Brothers or something. I want to talk to my kids on the phone, or I want to, catch up with my pops and not talk about football. I would try to get my mind off it. And then I wake up in the morning and go right back to bed until probably about 4:00, go to the stadium. And me and BG used to see who could nap longer during the day, I'd text him and be like, are you up, man? I just want to make sure you're awake. Let's get to the stadium. Some guys sleep all day, and that was my thing.
Yeah. Well, if there's another parade in our future, and I hope it's soon, will you promise you come back with the fur coat and the Iverson jersey? That was legendary.
You can put me on the washed up float, and I'll have a cooler to myself, as long as I can get a cooler to myself.
You'll never be washed up, baby. You're the real deal. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Love y'all, man. Appreciate it, Mike.
Back at you. Thanks, Chris.